"Hold it right there, you little punk," the little girl shouted at the millionaire's son, who was smashing all the plates just to show off. Then he breaks another one, and the girl does something that shocks everyone. Rate my story from 0 to 10 in the comments. Your opinion is very important, and subscribe to my channel to support my work. I'm counting on your help. The crystal of the goblet shattered against the polished marble of the mansion, sending glittering fragments all over the grand hall. The small, 4-year-old street urchin, who looked barely 2 because of the extreme fragility of her body, marked by hunger, watched in horror from the doorway, where she had managed to hide between the legs of the elegantly dressed guests. The spoiled son of the homeowner, also 4 years old, but with the robust body of someone who had never known deprivation, held another priceless porcelain plate above his head, his eyes gleaming with a childish cruelty that made the adults laugh nervously. The charity gala was in full swing at the most luxurious mansion in the metropolis, where multi-millionaires gathered to display their wealth while pretending to care about the less fortunate. The girl had arrived there following the smell of food emanating from the place, her bare and wounded feet guiding her through the gilded gates she had never imagined crossing. For years living on the streets, she had learned to hide in the shadows, but something in that scene of gratuitous destruction awakened a fury that she could not contain. The rich boy hurled another plate against the floor, and the sound of shattering echoed through the hall like a perverse song. The guests applauded discreetly, some commenting on how the boy had a strong personality and would be a natural-born businessman like his father. The girl clenched her tiny fists, feeling a pain in her chest that went beyond the hunger that consumed her. The widowed millionaire watched the scene from afar, his dashing face masking the coldness that had made him famous in the business world. At 30 years old, he had amassed an impressive fortune investing in Wall Street stocks, diversifying his assets among luxury real estate, gold investments, and even bitcoins. His capital seemed to have no limits, but at that moment, watching his own son destroying priceless objects just for fun, he felt an emptiness that all his money could not fill. The cruel stepmother approached her husband, her calculating eyes gleaming with approval as she watched the destructive behavior of her stepson. She had married the millionaire only 6 months after the loss of his first wife, taking advantage of his vulnerability to ensure access to the family inheritance. Each broken plate represented to her a demonstration of the power she now possessed over that house and all the wealth it contained. The little street urchin couldn't take it anymore. When she saw the boy picking up the last plates from the table, pieces that seemed to be the most precious of the entire collection, something inside her exploded like an emotional bomb. "Hold it right there, you little punk!" she screamed, her thin voice cutting through the air like a blade. The silence that followed was deafening. All the guests turned to look at the dirty and ragged child who had dared to interrupt the fun. The rich boy hesitated for a moment, surprised for the first time in his life to hear someone his age challenge him so directly. But the surprise soon turned into anger. With a malicious smile, he raised one of the most expensive plates above his head and looked directly at the girl. "Gonna stop me how?" he taunted, before throwing the porcelain with all his might against the floor. It was then that the street urchin did something that left everyone paralyzed with shock. Without hesitating for a second, she lunged toward the last plates that remained on the table, her small and fragile body flying through the air like a desperate bird trying to protect its nest. She landed in the middle of the sharp shards that covered the floor, her little hands reaching out to form a human barrier between the boy and the remaining china. The glass pierced her delicate skin, causing blood to run between her fingers, but she didn't move. She remained there, trembling with pain, but firm in her determination to prevent further destruction. The millionaire felt something stir in his chest, an emotion he had not experienced for months. The courage of that unknown child had touched a sensitive chord in his soul, awakening feelings that he believed he had buried along with his late wife. For the first time since becoming a widower, someone had shown a bravery that genuinely impressed him. The stepmother, realizing her husband's sudden interest in the child, felt a pang of alarm. Anything that could divert his attention from her carefully crafted plan represented a threat to the privileges she had acquired through manipulation and opportunism. The guests whispered among themselves, some shocked by the violence of the scene, others curious about what would happen next. The rich boy had stopped breaking plates, looking confused at the girl who was bleeding on the floor, as if he couldn't understand why someone would sacrifice themselves to protect objects that didn't belong to them. The little street urchin raised her face stained with tears and blood, her eyes meeting those of the millionaire across the crowd. At that moment, a silent connection was established between them, a mutual understanding that transcended words. She had shown a strength of character that he rarely found in his life, surrounded by self-seeking and superficial people. The businessman approached slowly, knelt beside the injured child, and with a gentleness that surprised everyone present, including himself, reached out to help her up. In that simple gesture, a decision was being made that would change the fate of both of them forever. The millionaire's decision to take the little street urchin home caused an emotional earthquake that shook the entire family structure. During the first few weeks, the mansion turned into a silent battlefield, where every move was calculated and every look carried hidden intentions. The resilient girl, accustomed to the harshness of the streets, found herself lost amidst the suffocating luxury that surrounded her. The immense rooms with towering ceilings made her feel even smaller than she already was, and the soft carpets beneath her bare feet felt strange after years of walking on hot asphalt and cold concrete. The emotional scars of a childhood marked by survival prevented her from fully accepting the kindness that was now being offered to her. The perfectionist millionaire, known for his calculating coldness in business, which had earned him millions in dividends, found himself in unfamiliar territory. His investments in funds and stocks had always followed a precise logic, but dealing with a traumatized child required a sensitivity that he had buried along with his wife. Initially, he treated the girl with a professional distance, as if she were more of a business project than a person who needed affection. The manipulative stepmother, seeing her privileged position threatened, initiated a subtle but devastating campaign of sabotage. She began by hiding the medications that the doctor had prescribed to treat the infections in the girl's wounded hands, replacing them with harmless vitamins. When the child complained of pain, the cruel woman claimed that she was faking to get attention, planting seeds of doubt in her husband's mind. Accidents began to happen with suspicious frequency. Valuable plates appeared mysteriously broken, always near the place where the girl was playing. Antique furniture was found scratched, and invariably the stepmother managed to construct a convincing narrative that blamed the maladjusted child who didn't know how to live in a civilized home. The spoiled son, accustomed to being the center of attention, initially reacted with hostility to the presence of the intruder. He broke the few toys that had been bought for her, hid her food, and threw dramatic tantrums whenever she received any kind of attention. His destructive behavior intensified, but now directed specifically at harming the new resident of the house. During the second month of living together, something unexpected began to emerge. The girl demonstrated an extraordinary ability for numbers that left everyone perplexed. When the family accountant visited the mansion to review investments and cash flow, she quietly observed the financial reports, memorizing long sequences of digits with disconcerting ease. The millionaire noticed this peculiar ability one morning when he found the girl in the office, reorganizing papers that contained information about his stock investments. She had separated the documents by profitability, creating organized piles that showed an intuitive understanding of the numbers that impressed even an experienced businessman like him. "How do you know that these papers are more important?" he asked, genuinely curious. "The bigger numbers mean more money," she replied simply, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. "And when the numbers grow fast, it's good. When they get small, it's bad." That answer awakened a painful memory in the millionaire's chest. His late wife possessed the same mathematical genius, the same ability to see patterns where others saw only random numbers. She had been responsible for many of the investment strategies that built the family fortune, diversifying investments in gold, euros, and even in the first cryptocurrencies when no one believed in that market. The stepmother, realizing the husband's growing interest in the girl's intelligence, intensified her efforts of sabotage. She began to hide important documents, blaming the child for losing them. She purposefully spilled liquids on financial reports and then accused the girl of being careless. Each accident was carefully orchestrated to make it seem that her presence in the house was more trouble than blessing. In the third month, during a particularly tense afternoon, the girl made a discovery that would completely change the family dynamic. While playing hide-and-seek alone through the halls of the mansion, she found a drawer slightly ajar in the stepmother's office. Curious, she opened it and found a stack of letters addressed to the family's charitable foundation. Even at her young age, she was able to understand that something was wrong when she saw sales invoices for items that should have been donated to families in need. Medications, clothing, and food that arrived at the house as donations were being sold, and the money was deposited into a bank account whose numbers she instantly memorized. The discovery left the girl confused and scared. She had lived on the streets. She knew the hunger and need that led people to do desperate things. But seeing someone stealing from those who already had nothing awakened in her an outrage that went beyond her childish comprehension. When she tried to tell the millionaire what she had found, the stepmother intercepted the conversation and cleverly distorted the situation. She claimed that the girl was making up stories to cause problems, that traumatized children often created elaborate fantasies to deal with their past traumas. "She's trying to separate us," whispered the cruel woman in her husband's ear. "Abandoned children do that when they feel insecure. It's a known defense mechanism." The millionaire, still learning to navigate unexpected parenthood, was torn between trusting the wife he had known longer and believing a child who could barely articulate her suspicions clearly. The doubt planted by the stepmother began to grow like a weed in his mind, especially when more accidents began to happen in the following days. The tension in the house reached a critical point when the girl, frustrated at not being able to make herself understood, tried to physically show the documents she had found. But when they arrived at the stepmother's office, the drawer was empty, and there was no evidence of what she claimed to have seen. The stepmother feigned maternal concern, suggesting that maybe it was time to seek psychological help for the child. "She needs to process the trauma of having lived on the streets," she argued with fake tears in her eyes. "These hallucinations may get worse if they are not treated properly." That night, while the house slept, the little street urchin remained awake in her luxurious room, staring through the window at the stars that seemed as distant as the justice she was trying to achieve. Her little hands still ached from the wounds that slowly healed, but the pain in her heart was much greater. She knew she had seen something important, something that could change everything, but she couldn't find a way to prove her version of the facts. The fourth month brought an unexpected twist that no one in the mansion had foreseen. The spoiled son, who until then had been the girl's biggest antagonist, began to show signs of change that confused everyone around him. It all started when he witnessed his mother purposefully spilling red paint on a drawing the girl had made, and then accusing her of having ruined the priceless Persian rug. The boy, hidden behind the door, saw the whole setup and, for the first time in his young life, understood that not everything his mother said was true. The revelation left him deeply disturbed, especially when he saw the girl being punished for something she hadn't done. A seed of doubt was planted in his childish mind, making him question other similar situations he had witnessed. From that moment on, the boy began to observe his mother's behavior more closely. He noticed how she always appeared in the places where the accidents happened, how her explanations were always too readily available, how she managed to shift the blame to the girl with an ease that now seemed suspicious to him. The girl, in turn, had developed her own strategy for dealing with the constant sabotages. Her extraordinary photographic memory, which had initially manifested only with numbers, began to expand to other aspects. She could memorize exactly where each object was positioned before the accidents, creating a detailed mental map that contradicted the stepmother's versions. During a rainy afternoon, while the stepmother was at the spa, spending part of the family fortune on expensive beauty treatments, the spoiled son approached the girl for the first time without hostility. He found her in the winter garden, drawing birds in a notebook she had found in the library. "Why do you always draw those creatures?" he asked, genuinely curious. "Because they can fly wherever they want," she replied, without looking up from the paper. "When I was on the street, I saw them flying high, away from everyone who wanted to hurt them." The boy was silent for a moment, processing those words. For the first time, he began to understand that the girl's life before arriving at the mansion had been very different from his own privileged existence. "My mom is lying about you, isn't she?" he asked finally, his voice charged with a premature maturity. The girl stopped drawing and looked him in the eyes. "You saw?" "I saw her putting the paint on your drawing," admitted the boy, tears beginning to form in his eyes. "And I saw other things too. She hurt you on purpose." That confession marked the beginning of an unexpected alliance between the two children. The boy, who had grown up blindly believing everything his mother said, now found himself forced to confront the reality that the person he trusted most was being cruel to someone defenseless. In the days that followed, he began to discreetly defend the girl. When the stepmother tried to blame her for some accident, the boy provided alibis, saying that she was playing with him in another location at the time of the incident. His interventions confused the cruel woman, who couldn't understand the sudden change in her son's behavior. The millionaire, observing this rapprochement between the children, felt a growing curiosity. His financial investments continued to yield substantial profits. His investments in cryptocurrencies had tripled in value, but the family dynamics intrigued him more than any profitability report. It was during this period that he made a disturbing discovery about his own past. Reviewing old medical documents of his late wife, he found inconsistencies in the reports that he had never noticed before. The dates didn't match. The symptoms described didn't correspond to what he had witnessed, and there were prescriptions for medications that she had never taken. Intrigued, he decided to investigate further. He hired a discreet private investigator to examine the circumstances of his wife's death, something he had never questioned due to the overwhelming pain he felt at the time. What he discovered left him shocked. There was evidence that the doctors who attended to his wife had financial connections with third parties, and the treatments had been deliberately inadequate. Meanwhile, the girl was doing her own silent investigation. Her ability to memorize numbers had evolved into an almost supernatural ability to detect patterns. She began to notice that whenever the stepmother left the house, specifically on Tuesdays and Thursdays, she returned with bags of expensive purchases, despite there being no records of corresponding withdrawals in the family accounts that she occasionally saw in the office. The girl began to mentally note these patterns, creating a detailed chronology of the stepmother's suspicious movements. Her mind, trained by the need for survival on the streets, was naturally adapted to identify behaviors that didn't make sense. During one of those absences of the stepmother, she made an even more alarming discovery. While carefully exploring the couple's room, she found documents hidden behind a valuable painting. They were papers that she couldn't read completely, but the numbers they contained were instantly memorized. Bank account numbers, transfer amounts and dates that corresponded exactly to the periods of the stepmother's mysterious outings. The spoiled son, now her ally, helped her put everything back exactly as it was, using his own experience in mischief to ensure they left no trace. Together, they began to form a small investigation team, united by the common desire to discover the truth. But the stepmother was not naive. She had noticed the change in her son's behavior and the growing confidence that the girl demonstrated. She decided to intensify her strategy, planning a coup that would completely isolate the child and restore her absolute authority over the family. The opportunity arose when she discovered that the millionaire was investigating the death of his first wife. Instead of panicking, she saw a chance to manipulate the situation to her advantage. She planted false evidence suggesting that the girl was trying to poison the family, using the same medications that had been prescribed for the deceased wife. She carefully hid empty vials of these medications in the girl's room, creating a narrative where the traumatized child was repeating patterns of violence she had learned on the streets. To make the story more convincing, she went to the extreme of inducing mild symptoms of intoxication in herself, feigning malaise after meals prepared in the kitchen where the girl was playing. The plan was diabolically clever. It took advantage of the girl's known trauma, the ongoing investigation into the death of the first wife, and the social prejudices about street children. When she presented her evidence to her husband, including the planted vials and her own forged symptoms, the accusation seemed not only plausible, but frighteningly coherent. The millionaire, confronted with what seemed to be a direct threat to the safety of his family, felt the world crumble around him. The child who had touched his heart with her courage was now presented as a possible potential murderer. The doubts that the stepmother had planted about the girl's mental stability now seemed prophetic. That night, a tense meeting took place in the living room of the mansion. The stepmother presented her accusations with tears in her eyes. The millionaire struggled against disbelief and pain, while the girl couldn't fully understand what she was being accused of. The spoiled son, silent witness to all the manipulation, found himself divided between defending his new friend and openly confronting his mother, a decision that could change his life forever. The tension in that living room was palpable when the spoiled son made the bravest decision of his young life. With trembling hands and a choked voice, he interrupted his mother's accusations with a revelation that would change everything. "She didn't do anything!" shouted the boy, tears streaming down his face. "It was you, Mom! I saw you putting those little vials in her room. I saw you pretending you were feeling sick." The silence that followed was devastating. The stepmother turned pale instantly, her mask of victim shattering before everyone's eyes. The millionaire stared at his own son, slowly processing the implications of that confession. "What are you saying?" he asked, his voice charged with a mixture of hope and terror. The boy, now determined to tell the whole truth, began to recount everything he had witnessed. The forged accidents, the paint spilled on purpose, the lies fabricated to blame the girl. Each word was like a stab in the heart of the stepmother, who saw her carefully constructed plan collapsing. The girl, who until then had remained silent and frightened, felt a renewed courage when she saw her unlikely defender. With her extraordinary memory, she began to recite bank account numbers that she had memorized, specific dates of suspicious financial transactions, and precise details about the hidden documents she had found. The millionaire was shocked by the accuracy of the numbers the child recited. It was information she shouldn't have had access to, complex financial data that not even he memorized with such accuracy. Immediately, he checked the numbers in his financial system and discovered that they all corresponded to real transactions related to the family's charitable foundation. Desperate, the stepmother tried a last card. She claimed that both children were conspiring against her, that the girl had manipulated her own son to create those elaborate lies. But her credibility was already shattered, and each new allegation sounded increasingly desperate and implausible. It was then that the millionaire made a discovery that left him breathless. During his investigation into his deceased wife, he had found a disturbing pattern in the medical records. The same medications that supposedly caused his wife's worsening condition now appeared in the charade set up against the girl. The coincidence was impossible to ignore. "You killed my wife," he whispered, the realization hitting him like a lightning bolt. The stepmother tried to deny it, but the millionaire was already connecting all the dots. She had approached him shortly after his wife's death, offering comfort and support during his grief. She had suggested the doctors who attended to his wife in her final moments. She had been present in all the important decisions related to the treatments that, now he realized, were deliberately inadequate. "She wasn't really sick," he continued, the pieces of the puzzle fitting together in his mind. "You poisoned her slowly, and when I started investigating, you tried to do the same thing with the girl to create a smokescreen." The accusation was the trigger for an explosive confession. Under pressure, and seeing that her charade had been completely unmasked, the stepmother revealed the extent of her manipulation. She had known the millionaire years before his wife's death, studying his habits, his fortune, and his vulnerabilities. The plan had been meticulously crafted for months, but the most shocking revelation was yet to come. In her fury and desperation, she blurted out information that no one expected. The boy she had presented as her biological son was not really hers. She had informally adopted the child from a vulnerable woman, using him as an integral part of her scheme to approach the widowed millionaire. The boy, hearing that confession, felt his world collapse completely. The woman he called mother was not only a murderer and scammer, but she had also lied about his own identity. He began to cry uncontrollably, unable to process the magnitude of the lies that had shaped his entire life. The girl, demonstrating an impressive emotional maturity for her age, approached the boy and hugged him. Both had been victims of the same cruel woman. Both had been used as pawns in a deadly game they didn't understand. The millionaire, overcome with a fury he had never felt before, demanded to know where the boy's real mother was. The stepmother, with nothing left to lose, revealed that the woman was hospitalized in an exclusive private clinic, kept sedated with unnecessary medications. She had created a false narrative about severe mental problems to justify the prolonged hospitalization, while using the child for her own purposes. "Is she alive?" asked the millionaire, barely able to believe the extent of that woman's cruelty. "She is, but you'll never find her," replied the stepmother with a bitter smile. "I changed all the documentation. She doesn't even remember her own name anymore." It was at that moment that the girl did something extraordinary. With her photographic memory, she began to recite a complex numerical sequence that she had seen in the stepmother's hidden documents. It was a clinic identification code, followed by medical record numbers and admission dates, information she had memorized without even understanding its importance at the time. The millionaire immediately recognized the pattern of the numbers as belonging to a specific medical institution, one of the most expensive and discreet clinics in the area. Clinics that catered mainly to wealthy families who wanted to keep family secrets out of the public eye. Meanwhile, the stepmother had one last fit of desperation. She tried to flee the mansion, but her own stepson, the boy she had manipulated for years, blocked her path. With a determination that surprised everyone, including himself, he positioned himself in front of the door, preventing her from escaping. "You're not going anywhere," he said, his voice small but firm. "You have to pay for what you did to my real mom. And for what you did to her, too," he added, looking at the girl with genuine affection. The discovery that there was a living biological mother waiting for her son completely transformed the atmosphere of the house. The millionaire, driven by a desperate urgency to correct the injustices that had been committed under his own roof, immediately began planning an operation to find and rescue the boy's real mother. But there was still one final mystery to be solved. The girl, using her intuition sharpened by years of survival, felt that there was something else hidden in the house. Something that the millionaire's late wife had left behind. Something that could explain how she had discovered the stepmother's plans before her own death. With the help of the boy, she began to look for clues that the first wife might have hidden. Their search led them to the attic of the mansion, a place that had remained untouched since the woman's passing. There, among furniture covered by sheets and dusty boxes, they found something that would change everything once again. It was a safe, protected by a numerical code that seemed impossible to decipher. But the girl, looking at the numbers on the lock, felt a strange familiarity with the sequence. She had seen those numbers before, somewhere, memorized in her mind, along with so much other seemingly random information. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe to my channel. I promise to bring you videos every day that will make your life happier. Comment on what you thought of my story, giving a rating from 0 to 10, and thank you very much.